Welcome back to another episode of Infidelity Tales Lab. We're thankful for your continued viewership. Before we begin, tell us, where in the world are you watching from? We love knowing our global reach. Now, let's dive into today's story. Chapter 1. Foundations of Trust. Montgomery Monty Pierce had always lived by a code. As a former Navy intelligence officer turned successful security consultant, his life was built on three pillars: loyalty, discipline, and consequence. At 52, his salt and pepper hair and piercing blue eyes betrayed the intensity that had served him well both in military operations and civilian life. His security firm, Sentinel Shield, provided high-level protection services to wealthy clients and corporations, making him a wealthy man himself. The lakeside mansion in Connecticut where he now lived alone was a testament to his success and a reminder of his failures. The family photos had long been removed, but the memories remained etched in the walls. 15 years ago, Monty had discovered his wife Vivian's affair with Boyd Kessler, a charming art dealer who had wormed his way into their social circle. I should have seen it coming, Monty often thought during his early morning runs around the property. The signs were there: the late nights, the mysterious text messages, the sudden interest in art exhibitions. But he had trusted her implicitly, believed their 20-year marriage was unbreakable. The divorce had been brutal but swift. Monty had evidence, not just of the affair, but of Vivian's attempts to transfer joint assets to separate accounts. Always the strategist, he had moved preemptively, protecting most of his wealth while ensuring she received a fair settlement. He wasn't vindictive then, just practical. Their daughter Natalie had been 17 at the time of the divorce. Initially, she had sided with Monty, appalled by her mother's betrayal. But over time, Vivian's manipulative narrative had taken hold. "Your father was always absent, married to his work," she would tell Natalie. "Boyd gives me the attention and love I deserve." Now, at 32, Natalie had built a successful career as a pharmaceutical sales representative. 3 months ago, she had announced her engagement to Preston Redmond, a financial advisor with slick manners and a Harvard MBA. Monty had immediately sensed something off about Preston. The way his smile never reached his eyes, how he calculated every word in conversation. But for Natalie's sake, he had kept his reservations to himself. "Dad, can we meet for lunch?" Natalie had asked over the phone one spring afternoon. "There's something important I want to discuss." They met at Alessandro's, an upscale Italian restaurant in Hartford. Natalie looked radiant in her professional attire, her auburn hair, so like her mother's, framing her face. "Preston and I have been planning our wedding," she began after ordering. "It's going to be at the Rosewood Estate. We've always dreamed of a magical summer wedding." Monty smiled, genuinely happy to see her excitement. Despite everything, he loved his daughter deeply. "That sounds wonderful, sweetheart." Natalie fidgeted with her napkin. "The thing is, Dad, weddings are so expensive nowadays. And Preston and I are saving for our dream house in Greenwich." Monty immediately understood where this was heading. "You need help with the expenses? Would you be willing to contribute?" Her eyes, so like his own, looked at him pleadingly. "About $22,000 would cover the venue and catering. It would mean the world to us." He studied her face. There was something rehearsed about her plea, but he pushed the thought aside. "Of course I'll help. You're my only daughter." Relief washed over her face. "Thank you, Dad. And there's one more thing." She hesitated. "Mom and Boyd would like to be involved in the planning. I know things are difficult between you, but—" "It's your wedding, Natalie," Monty interrupted, his voice even. "I won't cause any problems." What Natalie didn't know was that Monty had already received intelligence about Boyd Kessler. His security firm had recently been approached by a wealthy collector who suspected fraud in the art world, and Boyd's name had surfaced in the investigation. Nothing concrete yet, but enough to raise flags. Monty had kept this information compartmentalized, a professional habit that had served him well. As the wedding planning progressed over the next few months, Monty noticed the growing distance between himself and his daughter. Invitations to participate in preparations were scarce, while Vivian and Boyd seemed to be deeply involved. When he did receive updates, they were mostly about costs and payment schedules. Russell Blackburn, Monty's closest friend and former military colleague who now worked at Sentinel Shield, had noticed his darkening mood. Something's off with this whole wedding situation, Monty confided during their weekly poker night. I feel like I'm being managed. Russell, a burly man with a tactical mind as sharp as Monty's, frowned. Trust your instincts. They've saved our lives more than once. Monty nodded, a plan already forming in his mind. I think it's time for a little reconnaissance. Chapter 2. Whispers of Deception. The wedding preparations accelerated as summer approached. Monty maintained his distance, as requested, but kept himself informed through subtle means. He had Xavier Donovan, a tech specialist at his firm, monitor social media activities surrounding the wedding party, all legally obtained from public posts. "Sir, you might want to see this," Xavier said one afternoon, showing Monty photos from a private dinner at Le Bernardin in New York. Preston, Natalie, Vivian, and Boyd were celebrating something, champagne glasses raised high. The caption read, "Planning the future with those who truly matter." Monty's jaw tightened. He hadn't been invited or even informed about this dinner. "There's more," Xavier hesitated. "Financial data you asked me to monitor shows large transfers from Boyd Kessler to Preston Redmond over the past 6 months. Around $150,000 total. Business deal?" Monty questioned. "Possibly, but the transfers are structured to avoid reporting requirements, and they coincide with significant withdrawals from accounts Natalie shares with Preston." Monty's instincts flared. This wasn't just about being excluded from wedding planning. Something more calculated was happening. The following weekend, Natalie invited Monty to her apartment to discuss final wedding arrangements. The $22,000 had already been transferred, but now she seemed nervous. "Preston's parents can't contribute as much as they planned," she explained, not quite meeting his eyes. "We might need another $8,000 for the honeymoon." Monty studied his daughter carefully. The slight tremor in her hands, the practiced pitch in her voice, signs he recognized from years of interrogation training. "Of course," he said smoothly. "Whatever you need." Her relief was palpable. "You're the best, Dad. I'm sorry Mom and Boyd have been so involved. It's just easier since they live closer to the venue." "I understand," he said, though he didn't. His home was actually 15 minutes closer to the Rosewood estate than theirs. After leaving Natalie's apartment, Monty called Russell. "I need surveillance on the rehearsal dinner. Nothing invasive, just audio in the private dining room." Russell didn't question him. Their years together had built unshakable trust. "Consider done. I'll handle it personally." The night before the rehearsal dinner, Monty received another call for Natalie. "Dad, I hate to ask this," she began, her voice honeyed in a way that reminded him painfully of Vivian. "But Preston and I found the perfect property in Greenwich. If we don't make a deposit by next week, we'll lose it. Could you possibly help with $50,000? We'll pay you back once Preston's commission comes through." Monty felt a cold clarity descend over him. "Send me the details of the property. I'll have my financial advisor look it over." "Oh, that's not necessary." "I insist," he said firmly. "If I'm investing in your future home, I want to make sure it's a sound investment." After hanging up, he asked Xavier to investigate the property. The results came back within hours. There was no property in Greenwich being considered by Preston and Natalie. The address provided belonged to a long-term holding of Boyd Kessler's art gallery. The pieces were falling into place, forming a picture Monty had suspected but hoped wasn't true. His daughter, the ex-wife, her lover, and the fiancé, all conspiring against him. The rehearsal dinner was held at the elegant Blue Water Grill, overlooking the Connecticut River. Monty arrived precisely on time, dressed impeccably in a tailored suit. He played his part perfectly, the proud father, gracious despite being seated at a table far from the main party, mostly with distant relatives and colleagues of Preston. Halfway through the dinner, he excused himself and met Russell in the restaurant service corridor. "Everything's set," Russell confirmed, handing him a small earpiece. "Audio is crystal clear." Monty inserted the device discreetly and returned to his table, now able to hear the conversation at the main table where Preston, Natalie, Vivian, and Boyd sat with Preston's parents. For 20 minutes, the conversation was mundane, wedding details, honeymoon plans, and side jokes. Then, As the dessert was served and champagne flowed freely, Preston leaned in closer to Natalie, not realizing his voice was being captured. "Once we get that final check from your dad, that's it," Preston murmured, his voice slightly slurred from alcohol. "Your dad's just an ATM. We'll cut him off after. Then we'll practically replace him with your mom's lover." Natalie giggled, casting a glance toward Monty's distant table. "Boyd's been more of a father to me anyway, and he knows how to turn this wedding investment into something worthwhile." Vivian chimed in, her voice low but clear. "Montgomery always was easy to manipulate. Flash a little family sentiment, and he opens his wallet. The security consultant who can't see what's right in front of him." Boyd's cultured voice added, "Once we leverage his contribution for the gallery expansion, he'll never know." The old military man still thinks in straight lines, not seeing the game around him. Preston raised his glass in a mock toast. "To Montgomery Pierce, the gift that keeps on giving." Monty sat perfectly still, his face betraying nothing as the laughter from the main table washed over him. Inside, something fundamental shifted. The cold calculation he had reserved for professional adversaries now turned toward his own family. As the dinner concluded, he approached the main table with warm smiles and congratulated the happy couple. "I'm looking forward to tomorrow," he said, embracing Natalie. "It will certainly be a day none of us will forget." Later that night, in the silent darkness of his home office, Monty made a series of phone calls. By dawn, everything was arranged. What had been planned as a wedding day would instead become a reckoning. His last call was to the Rosewood Estates manager, Florence Sullivan, an old client who owed him a significant favor after his firm had discreetly resolved a blackmail attempt against her family. "Florence, I need the Rosewood tomorrow morning. Empty. No staff, no preparations, nothing. But Mr. Pierce, your daughter's wedding, will not be happening as planned," he finished for her. "Trust me when I say this is necessary. I'll compensate everyone affected." After a pause, she agreed. "Very well. The estate will be empty when they arrive." Monty ended the call and opened his safe, removing a file marked contingency. Inside were documents he had prepared years ago, but never expected to use against his own blood. "So be it," he whispered to the empty room. Chapter 3. The Empty Venue. The morning of the wedding dawned bright and clear. Monty dressed methodically in his finest suit, checking his watch with military precision. By now, the wedding party would be discovering the empty venue. No decorations, no caterers, no guests being seated in white chairs on the manicured lawn. His phone rang precisely at 9:17 a.m. Natalie's name flashed on the screen. "Dad!" Her voice was frantic, bordering on hysterical. "Something terrible has happened. The venue is empty. Everything's gone. The wedding coordinator isn't answering. The caterers say they were canceled. Even the flowers are missing." "That's concerning," Monty replied, his voice calm. "Where are you now?" "At the Rosewood. Mom and Boyd are here too, and Preston's having a meltdown. Can you come right away? We need to figure out what happened." "I'll be there in 20 minutes. Monty arrived at the Rosewood estate to find chaos. Natalie was in tears, her wedding dress hanging forgotten in a garment bag. Preston was shouting into his phone, his face flushed with anger. Vivian was attempting to comfort their daughter while Boyd paced nervously, repeatedly checking his own phone. "Montgomery, thank God," Vivian exclaimed when she saw him. "This is a disaster. Everything's gone." Monty surveyed the scene with calculated detachment. "Has anyone contacted the venue management?" "They're not answering." Preston snapped. "This is completely unprofessional. We're going to sue them for everything they've got." "Perhaps I can help," Monty offered. "Florence Sullivan, the estate manager, is an old client. Let me call her directly." He stepped aside, pretending to make a call, then returned moments later. "Florence is on her way. She says there's been a terrible misunderstanding. In the meantime, she's offered us the use of the main house for a private discussion." Relief visibly washed over the group as they followed Monty into the elegant mansion. He led them to a spacious library where, to their surprise, an elderly gentleman in a tailored suit was waiting. "Who is this?" Boyd demanded. "This is Theodore Winters, my attorney," Monty explained smoothly. Given the circumstances, I thought legal counsel might be useful. The tension in the room shifted instantly from confusion to wariness. Dad, what's going on? Natalie asked, her voice small. Monty gestured for everyone to sit. I believe we should discuss what really happened to the wedding arrangements. Preston stepped forward aggressively. What does that mean? Do you know something about this disaster? I know everything, Preston, Monty replied, his voice now steel beneath silk. About the conversations you've had. About the plans you've made. About the money transfers between Boyd and you. About the non-existent Greenwich property. The color drained from Preston's face. Natalie looked between her fiancé and her father, confusion giving way to fear. Dad, I don't understand. Let me clarify, Monty interrupted, nodding to Theodore, who opened a leather portfolio and produced several documents. Last night at the rehearsal dinner, I heard everything. About being just an ATM to be cut off after the wedding. About replacing me with Boyd. About leveraging my contribution for the gallery expansion. Vivian stood up, her face a mask of indignation. You were spying on us? How dare you? Spare me the outrage, Vivian. It doesn't suit you after 15 years of lies. Monty's voice remained unervingly calm. The wedding isn't happening today. In fact, it's not happening at all. You can't do that, Preston shouted. The guests are on their way. No, they're not, Monty corrected him. All guests received a cancellation notice last night, citing a family emergency. The venue, caterers, florists, everything was canceled with generous compensation for their inconvenience. The shock in the room was palpable. Natalie began to cry again, but these were different tears, tears of exposure and guilt. Why would you do this? She whispered. Because actions have consequences, Monty stated simply. He turned to Theodore, who handed him another document. This is what you'll find in place of a wedding today. He placed the document on the coffee table. The heading read, Termination of financial support and legal notice of intent to pursue fraud charges. What is this? Boyd demanded, finally finding his voice. Evidence, Monty replied, of an elaborate plan to defraud me of significant funds through emotional manipulation and false pretenses. The $22,000 for the wedding was just the beginning. The additional $8,000 for a honeymoon that was already paid for by Boyd. The $50,000 deposit for a non-existent property. And the plans to extract much more. He faced his daughter directly. Natalie, did you really think I wouldn't investigate the Greenwich property? That I wouldn't notice the multiple transfers from Boyd to Preston that coincidentally matched your withdrawal patterns? Preston lunged forward suddenly, grabbing the document. This is ridiculous. You have no proof. On the contrary, Monty replied, unfazed by the outburst. Theodore, please play the recording. The attorney pressed a button on his phone, and the clear voices from the rehearsal dinner filled the room. Your dad's just an ATM. We'll cut him off after. Then we'll practically replace him with your mom's lover. Preston went pale. Natalie covered her mouth in horror. Vivian and Boyd exchanged panicked glances. That's not admissible. Boyd recovered first, his art dealer's smooth voice attempting to regain control. Recordings without consent aren't legal in Connecticut. Monty smiled coldly. Normally, you'd be right. But the Blue Water Grill has posted notices about security recordings on the premises, and all patrons give implied consent upon entering. A technicality, perhaps, but one that works in my favor. He stood, buttoning his suit jacket with deliberate precision. There will be no criminal charges filed today. No public scandal, yet. Instead, there will be consequences that are private, but significant. He handed each of them a separate document. These detail what happens next for each of you. I suggest you read them carefully. As they hesitantly took the papers, the door opened, and Florence Sullivan entered with several security personnel from Sentinel Shield. These gentlemen will escort you from the property once you've read your documents, Monty explained. I'll give you privacy to absorb the information. As he turned to leave, Natalie grabbed his arm. Dad, please, it wasn't my idea. Preston and Boyd convinced me. That's the most disappointing part. Natalie, Monty interrupted, gently removing her hand. You didn't need convincing. You chose this. With that, he walked out, closing the door behind him. In the empty great hall of the Rosewood estate, he finally allowed himself a moment of grief for the family he had lost. Not today, but years ago when betrayal first entered their lives. The difference was that now, he would no longer deny the truth or seek reconciliation. Now, there would only be justice. Chapter 4. The Architect of Vengeance. The aftermath of the wedding that never was spread through their social circles like wildfire. The official story, a private family matter requiring postponement, fooled no one. Rumors multiplied, ranging from cold feet to financial disputes. Monty remained silent, neither confirming nor denying any speculation. 3 days after the Rosewood estate confrontation, Monty sat in his home office with Russell and Xavier, reviewing the initial fallout. "Preston tried to contact you 17 times, Xavier reported, scrolling through his tablet. "Natalie, 23. Vivian, 5. Boyd hasn't called directly, but his lawyer has reached out twice." "And the documents?" Monty asked. Russell nodded. "Delivered and legally binding." They're scrambling to understand the full implications. What Monty had given each of them at the Rosewood were not simply threats, but meticulously crafted legal documents, each tailored to their specific vulnerabilities. For Preston, it was evidence of his financial improprieties, not just the scheme against Monty, but a pattern of questionable practices with client funds that would interest both his firm's compliance department and the Securities and Exchange Commission. The document outlined exactly how this information would be deployed if he attempted any retaliation or contact. For Natalie, it was the painful revelation that her trust fund, established by Monty's parents before their death, was now being redirected to veterans' charities. While legally he couldn't reclaim past distributions, the substantial remaining balance would never reach her. Additionally, her position at the pharmaceutical company, which had come through Monty's connection with the CEO, was now precarious at best. For Vivian, it was the exposure of her systematic efforts to turn Natalie against Monty over the years, documented through emails, texts, and recorded phone conversations, all obtained legally, but devastatingly effective if revealed to their remaining mutual friends and family. Her carefully crafted image as the wronged wife would crumble, along with the social standing she so cherished. For Boyd, it was the most dangerous document of all, a comprehensive file on his art dealings, including evidence of provenance manipulation, authentication fraud, and tax evasion. Monty had been building this file for years, initially as a protective measure, now as leverage. "They underestimated you," Russell observed. "They thought you were just a heartbroken ex-husband and sentimental father." Monty's face remained impassive, a common mistake. People see what they expect to see. "What's your next move?" Xavier asked. "Now we wait," Monty replied. "Let them absorb the reality of their situation. Real panic takes time to develop." The call came that evening, not from any of the four, but from Loretta Masterson, Boyd's gallery assistant and Vivian's longtime friend. Her voice was tense, attempting but failing to sound casual. "Montgomery, I hope I'm not disturbing you. Vivian and Boyd were wondering if you might meet them for dinner tomorrow. A chance to discuss recent events privately." "The Willows, 7 p.m., Monty replied without hesitation. "Just the three of us." The Willows was a secluded restaurant known for its private dining rooms and discretion, a place where difficult conversations could remain confidential. It was also a venue where Sentinel Shield had installed the security systems, giving Monty a particular advantage. "I'm not going in blind," Monty told Russell the next day as they prepared. "I want full surveillance capabilities and a backup team nearby." Russell nodded, handing him a sleek fountain pen. "New prototype from our R&D department. Records audio and transmits to our secure server. The clip contains a panic button if needed." Monty arrived at the Willows precisely at 7 p.m. Vivian and Boyd were already seated in a private room, tension evident in their postures despite their attempt at composure. Vivian had aged well, her blonde hair now expertly highlighted to disguise the gray, her face maintained through subtle procedures. Boyd remained handsome in that cultivated way of men who prioritize appearance: tailored clothes, perfect haircut, manicured hands. "Montgomery," Vivian greeted him, her voice softer than it had been in years. "Thank you for coming." Let's skip the pleasantries, Monty replied, taking a seat. You want to talk? So talk. Boyd cleared his throat. What happened at the Rosewood was unfortunate. Things were said at the rehearsal dinner that were inappropriate and untrue. Alcohol and pre-wedding stress led to poor judgment. Is that your position? Monty asked coldly. That I should dismiss conspiracy and fraud as drunken banter? We're not here to argue semantics, Vivian interjected. We're here to find a solution that works for everyone. The situation with Natalie is destroying her. She's devastated. As she should be, Monty replied without emotion. Actions have consequences. That's something I learned in the military and something all of you are now learning. Boyd leaned forward. Be reasonable, Montgomery. This vendetta serves no one. We're prepared to make amends, financially and otherwise. Monty allowed a small, dangerous smile. You misunderstand the situation. This isn't a negotiation. I'm not interested in your money or your apologies. Then what do you want? Vivian demanded, her facade of contrition slipping. Justice, Monty stated simply, and to ensure none of you can ever harm me or anyone else again. He removed a folder from his briefcase and placed it on the table. This contains additional information I've gathered on each of you. Information not included in the documents you received at the Rosewood. I thought you should know what else is in my possession. Boyd reached for the folder, but Monty stopped him. This is just for your viewing. Here. Now. They flipped through the pages, their faces growing paler with each revelation. The folder contained bank statements showing Boyd's offshore accounts, documents proving Vivian had systematically alienated Natalie from Monty through years of manipulation, and evidence that Boyd and Preston had conspired on multiple financial schemes beyond just targeting Monty. This is invasion of privacy, Boyd sputtered. You can't. I already have. Monty cut him off. The question is not what I've done, but what I'll do next. What do you want from us? Vivian whispered, real fear in her eyes now. Complete severance, Monty replied. You will remove yourself from my life entirely. No contact with me, my associates, or my business interests. Boyd will close his Connecticut gallery and relocate his business. Vivian will retract any statement she's made to mutual friends about our marriage and divorce. You're asking us to uproot our lives, Boyd protested. I'm giving you a choice, Monty corrected. Comply, or I release everything I have to the appropriate authorities and individuals. And Natalie? Vivian asked, her voice breaking. She's still your daughter. For the first time, emotion flickered across Monty's face. A brief spasm of pain quickly controlled. Natalie made her choice. She chose deception and betrayal. She'll have to live with that decision. You cut off your own child? Vivian pressed. After everything you said about being there for her? I was there for her, Monty replied, his voice dangerously quiet. For 32 years. Through every milestone, every challenge. I supported her education, her career, her dreams. And in return, she conspired to use me and discard me. He stood, buttoning his jacket. You have 48 hours to provide me with a detailed plan for complying with my terms. After that, I proceed with full disclosure of everything in that folder and more. As he turned to leave, Boyd called after him. This isn't over, Montgomery. Monty paused at the door. Actually, Boyd, it's just beginning. Chapter 5, Hidden Depths. The following morning, Monty received an unexpected visitor at Sentinel Shield's offices. Diane Halverson, Preston's mother, waited in the reception area, looking both determined and uncomfortable. Mrs. Halverson, Monty greeted her, ushering her into his private office. This is unexpected. Diane Halverson was a dignified woman in her 60s, her silver hair styled conservatively, her clothing expensive but understated. Unlike her son, whose ambition had always outpaced his ethics, Diane had a reputation for integrity. I'll be direct, Montgomery, she began once seated. Whatever Preston has done, and I suspect it's serious given the canceled wedding and his evasiveness, I don't believe Natalie's relationship with you should be permanent collateral damage. Monty studied her carefully. With all due respect, Mrs. Halverson, you don't know the full situation. Then tell me, she challenged. Because the Preston I'm seeing now panicked, aggressive, making frantic calls to financial advisors and attorneys, is not the son I thought I raised. And if he's involved in something that warranted your intervention, I want to understand it. There was something in her directness that Monty respected. He made a decision and pressed the intercom. Xavier, bring me the Redmond file. All of it. For the next hour, Monty systematically laid out the evidence, the conspiracy, the financial manipulation, the recorded conversations. Diane listened without interruption, her expression growing increasingly troubled. I had suspicions, she finally said when he finished. Small inconsistencies in Preston's stories about his success. The sudden lifestyle upgrades without corresponding legitimate income. His father noticed too, but we didn't want to believe. Few parents do, Monty acknowledged. Diane straightened her shoulders. I'm not here to defend him. What he did, what they all did, was unconscionable. But I'm here to ask if there's any path to redemption for Natalie. Why would you advocate for her? Monty asked, genuinely curious. She was part of this scheme against me and was willing to bring your son into a marriage built on deception. Because I was young once too, Diane replied. And I made terrible mistakes that I later regretted deeply. The difference was, I had people who gave me a chance to atone, not without consequences, but with an opportunity to prove I could be better. Monty's face remained impassive. I appreciate your perspective, Mrs. Halverson, but my decision is made. Diane nodded, accepting his position. As she stood to leave, she placed a business card on his desk. This is my private number. If you ever reconsider, I'd be willing to facilitate a conversation. Not reconciliation, but at least closure. After she left, Monty stared at the card, conflicting emotions warring within him. Finally, he placed it in his desk drawer rather than discarding it. A small, perhaps meaningless gesture that nonetheless felt significant. That evening, as Monty reviewed security protocols for an upcoming client project, Russell arrived with troubling news. Boyd's made some calls, he reported, to people we monitor because of their connections to less-than-legal problem-solving. Monty's expression didn't change. Expected. Boyd's always thought money could fix anything, including making people disappear. Should we alert authorities? Not yet. Let's see how far he's willing to go. Monty pulled up a secure file on his computer. Implement Protocol Mamba. Full surveillance, countermeasures active, protective details in rotation. Protocol Mamba was a comprehensive security procedure developed for high-risk clients facing credible threats, now being deployed for Monty himself. It meant every electronic device Boyd used would be monitored, his movements tracked, his contacts scrutinized. What about Vivian? Russell asked. Is she part of this? Unknown, Monty replied. But we'll find out. 3 days later, Xavier burst into Monty's office without knocking, something he never did. Sir, we've intercepted something critical, he said urgently, placing a laptop before Monty. Boyd received this email an hour ago. The email was from an encrypted account, confirming receipt of a substantial Bitcoin transfer and outlining a plan to resolve the Pierce situation permanently within the week. Monty read it calmly. Send this to Theodore with instructions to prepare a sealed evidence package for the FBI. Then call this number. He wrote down a sequence of digits. Tell them Lighthouse Protocol activated and give them Boyd's home and business addresses. Xavier looked confused. Who am I calling? An old contact from my military days who now works in federal law enforcement. This just became a federal case, conspiracy to commit murder across state lines. Within hours, Boyd Kessler was in FBI custody, his home and gallery raided simultaneously. The news broke on local stations by evening, though the full details were withheld pending investigation. Monty watched the coverage from his home office, a glass of scotch in hand. His phone rang, Vivian's number. Did you do this? She demanded when he answered, her voice shaking with rage and fear. Boyd did this to himself, Monty replied evenly. He chose to escalate from fraud to attempted murder. Murder? That's absurd. Boyd would never. The FBI has the evidence, Vivian, including cryptocurrency transfers to known contract killers. You might want to lawyer up yourself, depending on your level of involvement. A long silence followed. I had nothing to do with this, she finally said, her voice smaller now. I swear, Montgomery, whatever else I've done, I would never. For your sake, I hope that's true, he replied. Because if the investigation reveals otherwise, there's nothing I can do to help you. After hanging up, Monty poured another scotch and walked to the wall of windows overlooking the lake. The water reflected the moonlight, peaceful and undisturbed, contrasting sharply with the storm he had unleashed. His phone rang again, Natalie this time. He let go to voicemail. Minutes later, a text. Dad, please. I need to talk to you. I had nothing to do with what Boyd was planning. I'm scared. Monty stared at the message, feeling the familiar pull of paternal concern warring with his resolution to cut all ties. After long consideration, he typed a reply. Contact Diane Halverson. She'll help you get proper legal representation. Do not attempt to contact me again. He then blocked her number, finishing his drink in silence as the ripples on the lake gradually stilled to glass-like perfection. Chapter 6. Shifting Alliances. 1 week after Boyd's arrest, Monty received a visit from Special Agent Amelia Donaldson of the FBI. They met in a conference room at Sentinel Shield rather than at his home, maintaining the professional boundary he preferred. Agent Donaldson was sharp-featured and direct, with the focused intensity Monty recognized from his own military days. Mr. Pierce, thank you for your cooperation so far. We have some additional questions about your history with Mr. Kessler. Of course, Monty replied, though I've already provided a comprehensive statement. You have, she acknowledged. But we're now investigating a broader pattern of illegal activity tied to Mr. Kessler's art dealership. Your name appears in several documents we've seized, not as a participant, but as a potential target. This caught Monty's attention. Target in what sense? Financial, she clarified. It appears your daughter's wedding was part of a larger scheme. Mr. Kessler and Mr. Redmond had plans to approach you for investment in what they called the Connecticut Collection, supposedly rare artworks being assembled for a major exhibition, but actually a sophisticated Ponzi scheme. Monty absorbed this information. Have you spoken with Preston Redmond? We have. He's cooperating now, claiming he was manipulated by Kessler. She gave him a knowing look, though our assessment suggests he was a willing participant until things went south. And my daughter? Natalie Pierce. Agent Donaldson consulted her notes. Ms. Pierce maintains she was unaware of the full scope of their plans, particularly the financial scheme involving the art collection. However, she has admitted to knowing about and participating in the plan to extract the wedding funds from you under false pretenses. Monty nodded, his expression unchanged despite the confirmation of Natalie's betrayal. What happens now? Mr. Kessler will face multiple serious charges, including conspiracy to commit murder for hire. Mr. Redmond is negotiating a plea deal in exchange for testimony. Your ex-wife, Vivian Harlow, is currently classified as a person of interest, not a suspect. She paused. And your daughter is cooperating as a witness, though she may face lesser charges related to the financial fraud. After Agent Donaldson left, Russell found Monty in his office, staring at an old family photograph he normally kept locked away. You okay? Russell asked. I've been better, Monty admitted, a rare glimpse of vulnerability. Learning your own daughter saw you as nothing more than a resource to be exploited isn't easy, even when you suspected it. Russell nodded, understanding without need for elaboration. The Kessler situation is contained. The threat against you has been neutralized. Maybe time to step back, take some time away from all this. No, Monty replied, replacing the photograph in his desk drawer. There's still the matter of Vivian. Her part in this wasn't just the wedding scheme. It was 15 years of poisoning my relationship with my daughter, of creating the environment where Natalie could be turned against me. The authorities are handling Kessler and Redmond, Russell pointed out. Maybe let them handle Vivian too. The law can address the criminal aspects, Monty agreed. But some betrayals require a more personal accounting. 2 days later, Monty attended a charity gala at the Riverside Museum of Art, an event he knew Vivian would attend, as she sat on the museum's fundraising committee. He arrived alone, immaculately dressed, and made a substantial donation at the entrance, ensuring his presence would be noted. The whispers started the moment he entered the grand hall. His appearance at a social event so soon after the scandal of his daughter's canceled wedding and Boyd's arrest was unexpected. More shocking still was his apparent composure, his ease as he mingled with the city's elite. He spotted Vivian across the room, surrounded by a protective circle of friends. The news of Boyd's arrest had clearly affected her. Her normally perfect appearance showed signs of strain, her smile forced when required for social niceties. Monty approached her group during dinner, timing his arrival for maximum impact. Vivian, he greeted her with polite neutrality. "You look well, considering the circumstances." Her friends exchanged uncomfortable glances before discreetly creating distance, leaving them in a bubble of artificial privacy amid the crowded room. "What are you doing here, Montgomery?" Vivian hissed, maintaining her social smile despite her anger. "Haven't you done enough damage?" "I've done nothing but respond to the damage others attempted to inflict on me," he corrected her calmly. "Boyd made his choices. So did Preston. So did you. I had nothing to do with Boyd's plan to—" She stopped herself, aware of potential eavesdroppers. "To have me killed?" Monty finished for her, his voice low but clear. "I believe you. That was Boyd crossing a line even you wouldn't cross. But don't pretend innocence in everything else." Vivian's facade cracked slightly, real emotion breaking through. "What do you want from me? My reputation is in tatters, my relationship destroyed, my relationship with Natalie strained. Isn't that enough for you?" "Almost," Monty replied. "There's one more thing." He produced an envelope from his jacket pocket and handed it to her. "This contains instructions for returning every item of my mother's jewelry you took in the divorce. The pieces you claimed had sentimental value to you, despite never wearing them while we were married." Vivian paled. "Those were part of the settlement. They were family heirlooms meant for Natalie." Monty interrupted. "Since she's chosen to sever her connection to me and my family, this should be returned to the Pierce family line. My sister's daughters will appreciate them." Vivian stared at him, recognizing the underlying message. He was systematically erasing every connection, reclaiming every piece of himself she and Natalie had thought was theirs to keep or discard. "You become cruel, Montgomery," she whispered. "No," he contradicted her. "I become clear-sighted. There's a difference." He stepped back, preparing to return to his table. "The instructions include a deadline. I suggest you meet it." As he walked away, he felt a strange lightness, not satisfaction or pleasure or discomfort, but the unburdening that comes with closing a chapter completely. Boyd would face justice through the legal system. Preston's career and reputation were destroyed. Natalie would live with the consequences of her choices. And now, Vivian would return the last physical ties binding them together. Later that evening, as Monty prepared to leave the gala, he was approached by Helen Westbrook, an old family friend who had known his parents well. "Montgomery," she said, taking his arm. "Walk me to my car, would you? These heels are killing me." Outside in the cool night air, Helen spoke her mind with the directness of her 80 years. "I won't pretend to understand everything that's happened, but I know enough. Vivian always had a talent for rewriting history, and that Boyd character never struck me as trustworthy." Monty remained silent, allowing her to continue. "But Natalie was a good child once," Helen went on, "before Vivian got her hooks in deep. The girl I remember bringing to your mother's garden parties wouldn't have turned on you without years of poisoning." "People make their own choices, Helen," Monty replied, "regardless of influence." "True enough," the elderly woman conceded. "But not everyone has the strength to resist a persistent poison. Some of us are more susceptible than others." They reached her car, where her driver waited. Before getting in, Helen patted Monty's cheek affectionately. "Your father was a hard man, too, you know, principled to a fault. But he learned, eventually, that justice without mercy becomes its own kind of poison." She entered her car, leaving Monty standing alone in the parking lot, her words echoing in his mind. For a brief moment, he considered reaching out to Natalie, not to forgive, but perhaps to understand. Then he remembered the rehearsal dinner, her voice clear through the recording. "Boyd's been more of a father to me anyway." No, some betrayals cut too deep for understanding or mercy. Justice would have to be enough. Chapter 7. Unexpected Revelations. 3 months after Boyd Kessler's arrest, the media frenzy had finally begun to subside. Boyd remained in federal custody, denied bail due to the severity of the charges and his substantial overseas assets, making him a flight risk. Preston Redmond had secured a plea deal in exchange for his testimony, though he still faced significant prison time for his role in multiple financial crimes. Vivian had retreated from public life, selling her Connecticut house and reportedly relocating to Arizona to be near her sister. The jewelry had been returned as instructed, delivered by courier rather than in person, each piece accounted for and authenticated. Monty had immersed himself in work, expanding Sentinel Shield to include a new division specializing in fraud prevention for high-net-worth individuals. The irony wasn't lost on him, transforming his personal nightmare into a business opportunity. But the demand was undeniable, and he had unique insight into how the wealthy could be targeted by those they trusted most. On a crisp autumn morning, as Monty reviewed security protocols for a new client, Russell interrupted with unusual urgency. "You need to see this," he said, placing a file on Monty's desk. Xavier found it during a deep background search on Boyd Kessler. It wasn't in any of the FBI materials. Monty opened the file and froze. Inside was documentation of a private detective Boyd had hired 15 years ago, not to investigate Monty, as might be expected, but to investigate Vivian. Why would Boyd investigate Vivian back then? Monty asked, scanning the reports. They were already involved. "Keep reading," Russell urged. The detective's reports revealed a pattern that stunned even Monty, with all his suspicions and insights into his ex-wife's character. Apparently, Boyd hadn't been Vivian's first affair. He had been her fourth. More shocking still was the detective's conclusion that Vivian had been systematically targeting wealthy men, using each relationship to climb socially and financially before moving to the next opportunity. Boyd was investigating whether he was being played, Russell explained, whether he was just another stepping stone. Monty continued reading, his expression darkening as he reached the final pages. These contained DNA test results, comparing Boyd's DNA with samples from Natalie. "No," Monty whispered, the implications hitting him with the force of a physical blow. The results were conclusive. Boyd Kessler was Natalie's biological father. "The timeline checks out," Russell said quietly. Vivian's first documented meeting with Boyd was at that gallery opening in Boston, about a year before Natalie was born. Monty sat back in his chair, the revelation reshaping his entire understanding of the past 32 years. "She knew," he said finally. "Vivian always knew Natalie wasn't mine." "It appears so," Russell agreed. "And based on these notes, Boyd discovered it about 10 years ago, but kept it from both you and Natalie." "Why?" Monty asked, though the answer was forming in his mind even as he spoke. "Control," Russell suggested. "Leverage over Vivian. And perhaps protection of his relationship with Natalie. If she knew he concealed this for years while watching you raise her." Monty stood abruptly, needing movement to process the shock. All these years, the ballet recitals, the college tuition, the nightmares and fevers and heartbreaks. I was raising another man's child. A child conceived in betrayal before I even knew betrayal existed in my marriage. "What will you do with this information?" Russell asked. Monty stared out the window, watching autumn leaves swirl across the parking lot. "Nothing. For now." That evening, alone in his home, Monty poured a scotch and allowed himself to fully process the revelation. The anger came first, white-hot and consuming. Not just at Vivian and Boyd, but at the cosmic unfairness of it all. Then, gradually, something deeper and more painful. The realization that his most fundamental relationship, the one he had thought unbreakable despite everything, had been built on a lie from the very beginning. Yet alongside this pain came an unexpected clarity. Natalie's gradual estrangement over the years, her susceptibility to Vivian's manipulation, her ultimate betrayal, all took on a different dimension in light of biological reality. It didn't excuse her actions, but it provided a context he hadn't previously considered. His phone rang, interrupting his thoughts. The screen displayed a number he didn't recognize. Montgomery Pierce. He answered, his voice controlled despite his emotional turmoil. Mr. Pierce, this is Dr. Eleanor Winters from Hartford Memorial Hospital. A professional female voice responded. I'm calling regarding Natalie Pierce. You're listed as her emergency contact. Monty's grip tightened on the phone. What happened? Ms. Pierce was brought in following a single-vehicle accident on Route 9. She's stable, but has sustained serious injuries requiring surgery. She's been asking for you. Monty closed his eyes, conflicting emotions warring within him. I'll be there in 30 minutes. The hospital corridors were harshly lit, the antiseptic smell bringing back unwelcome memories of his own military injuries. Dr. Winters met him outside the surgical ward, a competent-looking woman in her 50s with tired eyes and precise movements. Mr. Pierce, thank you for coming. Natalie's in surgery now for a compound fracture of the femur and internal bleeding. The prognosis is good, but recovery will be lengthy. Was she alone in the car? Monty asked. Yes. Preliminary police report suggests she swerved to avoid an animal on the road and hit a guardrail. No alcohol or substances involved. The doctor hesitated. Before we took her to surgery, she was quite distressed, not just from pain. She kept saying she needed to tell you something important. Monty nodded, absorbing this information. When can I see her? Surgery should conclude within the hour. She'll be in recovery for another hour after that. I can have someone notify you when she's stabilized and conscious. Monty settled into the waiting room, declining coffee from a volunteer. As he sat, he noticed a familiar figure across the room. Diane Halverson, Preston's mother, reading a magazine with the concentrated focus of someone trying to distract themselves. She looked up, sensing his gaze, and, after a moment of surprise, approached him. Montgomery, I didn't expect to see you here. I could say the same, he replied, gesturing for her to sit. I've been helping Natalie since everything fell apart, Diane explained. Not financially, she's been handling that on her own since losing her trust fund, but as a support person, someone to talk to who understands the situation. That's unexpected, Monty admitted. Diane shrugged. I failed with Preston. I saw the warning signs for years and chose to ignore them, telling myself he'd grow out of his entitled behavior. Maybe helping Natalie is my way of atoning for that failure. They sat in surprisingly comfortable silence until Diane spoke again. She's been trying to rebuild her life. New job at a small local company, therapy twice a week, volunteer work with at-risk teens. No contact with Vivian or Boyd. Why are you telling me this? Monty asked. Because despite everything, I think you still care what happens to her, Diane replied simply. And because she cares what you think, even now. Before Monty could respond, a nurse approached. Mr. Pierce? Natalie is out of surgery and asking for you. Diane touched his arm lightly as he stood. Just listen. That's all I ask. Natalie looked small in the hospital bed, her face pale against the white sheets, and four in her arm and her leg elevated in a complex brace. When she saw Monty, her eyes filled with tears. Dad, she whispered, her voice rough from the intubation tube, recently removed. You came. The hospital called, he replied, keeping his distance. They said you needed to tell me something. Natalie nodded weakly. I found out about Boyd, that he's my biological father. Monty stiffened, surprised. Ow, FBI investigation, she explained, each word clearly costing her effort. They found the DNA test in Boyd's records. Agent Donaldson told me last week. Monty moved closer despite himself. I just found out today. Different source. Doesn't matter, Natalie continued. Needed you to know. I didn't know. All these years, I didn't know. Would it have changed anything if you had? Monty asked, the question that had been haunting him. Tears slipped down her cheeks. Everything. It would have changed everything. She reached out a hand, and after a moment's hesitation, Monty took it. Her fingers were cold, reminding him painfully of holding her hand at ice skating lessons when she was 7. Not asking for forgiveness, she whispered. Just need you to know, you're my real father. Always. The only one who mattered. The monitor tracking her vital signs beeped insistently as her pulse elevated. A nurse entered, checking the readings with concern. She needs to rest, the nurse advised Monty. You can come back tomorrow. As he turned to leave, Natalie gripped his hand with surprising strength. One more thing, she said urgently. Mom's gone to Arizona, but not to her sister. She's meeting someone, a new target, a widower with a tech fortune. Monty frowned. How do you know this? She called me before I stopped all contact, bragging about her new start. Said she'd finally found someone worthy after wasting years with Boyd. The nurse intervened more firmly. Sir, please. She really needs to rest now. Monty gently disentangled his hand from Natalie's. I'll be back tomorrow, he said, surprised to realize he meant it. Outside the hospital room, he found Diane waiting. How is she? She asked. Recovering, Monty replied, his mind already processing Natalie's revelation about Vivian. Thank you for looking out for her when I didn't. Diane studied his face. What will you do now? Finish what I started, Monty answered, but perhaps with new information that changes the equation. Chapter 8. The Final Pieces. The Arizona sun beat down mercilessly as Monty drove his rental car through the exclusive Paradise Valley neighborhood. His research had identified Vivian's widower with a tech fortune as Leonard Garrison, founder of a successful cybersecurity firm that had recently been acquired by a major tech conglomerate for billions. Garrison's Spanish-style mansion sat on 5 acres of manicured desert landscape, a monument to wealth that would certainly appeal to Vivian's sensibilities. Monty parked outside the gates, observing the property through specialized binoculars. Security was visible but not excessive, typical for wealthy individuals who hadn't yet experienced any threats to their safety. His phone rang, Russell checking in from Connecticut. You sure about this approach? Russell asked when Monty answered. We could handle Vivian more discreetly. This isn't just about Vivian anymore, Monty replied, watching a catering van pass through the security gate. It's about breaking a pattern that will otherwise continue indefinitely. And Natalie? How does she fit into this new plan? Monty lowered the binoculars, considering the question. He had visited her in the hospital every day for a week before returning to Connecticut to make arrangements. Their conversations had been cautious, layered with unspoken emotions and unresolved betrayals, but they had talked more honestly than they had in years. That remains to be seen, he finally answered. For now, let's focus on the task at hand. Is everything prepared on your end? All set, Russell confirmed. Theodore has the documents ready. Xavier has the technical aspects covered. We're just waiting for your signal. Good. I'll make contact tomorrow. The following morning, Monty dressed carefully in a bespoke suit that projected both wealth and authority. He had arranged a meeting with Leonard Garrison under the pretext of discussing potential security upgrades for his estate, a service Sentinel Shield legitimately provided to exclusive clients. As his car approached the mansion's gate, he noted Vivian's silver Mercedes in the circular driveway. Perfect timing. Leonard Garrison greeted him in a sunlit office overlooking the pool area. He was in his mid-60s, fit for his age, with intelligent eyes and the relaxed confidence of someone accustomed to success. Mr. Pierce, a pleasure to meet you, Garrison said, shaking Monty's hand firmly. Your company's reputation is impressive. I've been meaning to upgrade my security systems since the acquisition made headlines. Increased public profile often necessitates enhanced precautions. Monty agreed smoothly. Shall we discuss your current setup and concerns? They were deep in conversation about surveillance systems when the office door opened and Vivian entered, carrying a tray with iced tea. She froze when she saw Monty, the tray wobbling dangerously in her hands. Montgomery, she gasped, her composed facade cracking. What are you doing here? Garrison looked between them, confusion evident. You two know each other? Intimately, Monty replied, his voice calm. Vivian is my ex-wife. Ex-wife, Garrison repeated, his posture shifting subtly. Vivian, you told me you were widowed. The tray finally slipped from Vivian's hands, shattering on the tile floor, iced tea spreading like a flood around designer shoes that Monty recognized as a recent purchase, likely funded by Garrison's generosity. Leonard, I can explain, Vivian began, her voice taking on the familiar, pleading tone Monty knew so well. Montgomery and I have been separated for years. It's complicated. It's actually quite simple, Monty interrupted, removing a folder from his briefcase. Mr. Garrison, I apologize for the deception regarding the purpose of my visit. I'm not here to discuss your security systems. The Sentinel Shield would be happy to provide those services at a later date. Then why are you here? Garrison demanded, his initial confusion hardening into wariness. To provide you with information that may protect you from a particular type of security threat. Monty opened the folder and removed several documents. Information about Vivian Harlow's pattern of targeting wealthy men, her involvement in financial fraud schemes, and her connections to Boyd Kessler, who is currently awaiting trial for multiple felonies, including conspiracy to commit murder for hire. This is slander, Vivian cried, her face flushed with anger and fear. Leonard, he's just a bitter ex-husband trying to ruin my chance at happiness. Garrison, however, was already reviewing the documents with the focused attention of a successful businessman. These bank transfers, these timeline correlations. He looked up at Vivian. You told me you inherited your Connecticut house from your parents. I can explain everything, Vivian insisted, moving toward him, but Garrison raised a hand to stop her. Mr. Pierce, what is your objective here? He asked, his voice now coolly professional. Intervention, Monty replied simply. Not revenge, as Vivian suggests, but prevention. You're the latest in a pattern that stretches back decades. I'm merely providing you with facts that allow you to make an informed decision. Garrison nodded, then turned to Vivian. I think you should pack your things and leave today. My security team will assist and ensure you take only what legitimately belongs to you. Leonard, please, Vivian begged, tears now streaming down her perfectly made-up face. This is all a misunderstanding. The DNA test results showing Boyd Kessler is Natalie's biological father. Is that a misunderstanding too? Monty asked quietly. Vivian went utterly still, the color draining from her face. How did you? It doesn't matter how I know. Monty cut her off. What matters is that you lied to me for 32 years about the most fundamental relationship in my life. You lied to Natalie her entire life. And now you're lying to Mr. Garrison about your very identity. Garrison pressed a button on his desk. Security will escort you to collect your belongings, Vivian. Whatever our relationship was, it's over now. 2 security guards appeared promptly. Vivian glanced between them, Garrison and Monty, apparently calculating her options before her shoulders slumped in defeat. This isn't over, Montgomery, she hissed as she passed him on her way out. You've taken everything from me. No, Vivian, he replied calmly. I've simply stopped you from taking anything more from others. After she left, Garrison poured 2 glasses of scotch from a crystal decanter, handing one to Monty. I should thank you, I suppose, though this is a hell of a way to discover I've been deceived. Better now than after marriage or commingled assets, Monty observed, accepting the drink. She would have eventually moved on to the next opportunity, leaving maximum damage in her wake. Garrison studied him over the rim of his glass. You didn't do this out of the goodness of your heart. What's your real motivation? Closure, Monty admitted, and ensuring that Vivian's pattern of destruction ends permanently. What happens to her now? That depends on her. The evidence I've provided you is also being sent to the FBI as a supplement to their ongoing investigation into Boyd Kessler's activities. Whether charges result from that will be up to the prosecutors. Garrison nodded, understanding the implications. And you? What happens to you now? Monty considered the question, thinking of Natalie in her hospital bed, of the decades of deception, of the shattered family that had never been what he thought it was. I rebuild, he said finally, on foundations of truth this time, however painful that truth might be. Later that evening, as Monty's plane departed Phoenix, he received a text from an unknown number. She left with 2 suitcases and a painting she claimed was hers. Security verified ownership. No incidents. Thank you for the warning. LG. Following this was another message, this one from Diane Halverson. Natalie's being discharged tomorrow. She's asked if you'll be back in time. Monty stared at the messages, feeling a strange lightness despite the turbulence the plane was experiencing. For the first time in months, perhaps years, he was moving forward rather than simply reacting to betrayal. Whether that forward motion included Natalie remained to be seen, but at least the decision would be based on truth rather than illusion. He typed a reply to Diane, "I'll be there." Flight lands at 8 a.m. Chapter 9, Justice Served. 2 years after the wedding that never happened, Monty stood at the window of his office at Sentinel Shield, watching autumn leaves swirl across the parking lot. The company had expanded significantly, now occupying 3 floors of the building and specializing in personal security for high-net-worth individuals, with a particular focus on protection from fraud and exploitation. The legal consequences for those who had conspired against him had finally played out to their conclusions. Boyd Kessler had been sentenced to 20 years for multiple charges, including conspiracy to commit murder for hire, art fraud, and tax evasion. Preston Redmond, after his plea deal, received 8 years for wire fraud and conspiracy. Both men's professional lives were destroyed beyond recovery. Vivian had avoided prison, but not consequences. The FBI investigation had uncovered enough evidence of her knowledge of Boyd's fraudulent art dealings to force a plea agreement. She received 5 years of probation, substantial fines, and was required to make restitution to several victims. More devastating to her personally was the complete social ostracism that followed. The society circle she had worked so hard to climb rejected her entirely. Last Monty had heard, she was living modestly in Nevada, working as an administrative assistant at a community college, a far cry from the luxury she had schemed so ruthlessly to attain. A knock at his door interrupted his thoughts. Russell entered, carrying a newspaper. "Thought you might want to see this," he said, placing it on Monty's desk. The business section featured an article about Sentinel Shield's new initiative, a foundation providing resources and support to victims of complex financial fraud, particularly those victimized by people they trusted. "Good press," Russell observed. "The Montgomery Pierce Foundation for Victim Recovery making quite an impact." Monty nodded, scanning the article. "The irony isn't lost on me. Building something positive from my own experience as a victim." Speaking of building something positive, Russell began, hesitating uncharacteristically. "Have you given any more thought to Natalie's proposal?" The question hung in the air. Natalie's relationship with Monty had undergone a complex evolution since her accident and the revelations that followed. After months of careful, tentative communication, she had asked if she could join the foundation's work, using her experience on both sides of fraud to help others recognize warning signs and recover from betrayal. "I have," Monty replied finally, "and I've made my decision." Later that afternoon, Monty met Natalie at a small cafe equidistant between his office and the physical therapy center where she now worked helping accident survivors regain mobility. Her recovery had been long and painful, leaving her with a slight limp, but also with the resilience she had lacked before. "You look well," he observed as she joined him, noting the healthy color in her cheeks and the clear confidence in her eyes that had replaced the manipulative charm she had inherited from Vivian. "Better every day," she agreed, both physically and otherwise. After ordering coffee, she looked at him directly. "Have you decided about my proposal to work with the foundation?" Monty studied her face, the face he had believed for 32 years belonged to his biological daughter. The DNA revelation had shaken him to his core, forcing him to reevaluate every assumption about his life and family. Yet in the midst of that painful reckoning had come an unexpected truth. Biology wasn't the only definition of fatherhood. "I've decided to accept your proposal," he said, "but with conditions." Relief washed over her face. "Anything. You'll start as a consultant, not a full employee. You'll work with the educational outreach program, sharing your perspective with others who have been manipulated into participating in fraud. After 6 months, we'll reevaluate." Natalie nodded, accepting the terms without protest. "Thank you for the opportunity. I know I haven't earned your trust back yet, but I will." "Trust is earned through consistent actions over time," Monty agreed. "This is a beginning, not a resolution." They sipped their coffee in surprisingly comfortable silence, before Natalie spoke again. Have you heard the latest about Boyd? No, Monty replied. I don't follow his situation closely. He's trying to get his sentence reduced by providing information about other art dealers involved in fraud. The FBI doesn't seem interested. She hesitated. He also tried to contact me again. Sent a letter claiming he always wanted to acknowledge me as his daughter, but Vivian wouldn't allow it. And what did you do with the letter? Monty asked, curious about her response rather than the content of Boyd's manipulations. Sent it to the FBI for their file and blocked all further communications from him. She answered simply, He's not my father. Biology doesn't make a parent. Monty nodded, acknowledging the weight of her words. No, it doesn't. After finishing their coffee, they walked to the parking lot together. Before getting into her car, Natalie turned to him. There's something else I've been wanting to ask you. Go ahead. Diane Halverson has been a real support to me through everything. She's hosting a Thanksgiving dinner and asked if I would invite you. She rushed on before he could respond. It would just be a small gathering. Diane, her daughter from Seattle, me, and you if you're willing. No pressure, just an opportunity. Monty considered the invitation. 2 years ago, he would have rejected it outright, viewing any family gathering as a potential trap. But the man he was now, shaped by betrayal but not defined by it, saw things differently. Tell Diane I accept, he said finally. I'll bring the wine. Natalie's smile was genuine, without the calculated charm that had once reminded him so painfully of Vivian. I'll let her know. As she drove away, Monty remained in the parking lot, contemplating the journey from the empty wedding venue to this moment. The betrayals had been real and devastating. The consequences he had engineered for those who had wronged him had been severe and uncompromising. He had not forgiven, would never forgive, the calculated deception that had nearly destroyed him. Yet somehow, in the process of delivering justice, he had also found a path forward, not back to what was lost, but toward something new, something built on clearer vision and harder truths. His phone buzzed with a text from Russell. Security details for the Reynolds contract look good. Moving forward? Monty typed his response, yes. Proceed. He pocketed his phone and walked to his car, steps sure and purpose clear. The past had taught him that betrayal came with devastating costs. But it had also taught him that survival, true survival, not just existence, required moving forward with open eyes and unwavering resolve. Montgomery Pierce had always lived by a code: loyalty, discipline, and consequence. That hadn't changed. But now, perhaps, there was room for one more principle: rebuilding. Not with blind trust, but with vigilant discernment. Not with the same players, but with carefully chosen new ones. And always with the understanding that justice, once served, created space for what came next. It wasn't forgiveness. It wasn't forgetting. But it was in its own way freedom. And there you have it. Another story comes to an end. What did you think? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments below. If you enjoy this story, consider joining our community by subscribing. It means the world to us. For more stories like this one, check out the recommended videos on screen. And I'll see you there.